Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm starting a series that I'm going to call Easy, Medium and Hard. I saw a creator on here do this a couple months ago where she tested her skills on patterns from the same pattern brand that were graded as easy, medium or hard, and I thought that was such a fun idea. So thank you to With Wendy for the inspiration. I love your videos. And I'm really looking forward to this challenge. Now, I didn't want to go out and buy new patterns just for this, especially when I have so many patterns already. I know I've mentioned this before, but I started buying patterns before I started sewing because I thought somehow magically by having the pattern, the item would turn up in my wardrobe. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually work like that, but it does mean I have many patterns. So I have dug through my stash to see which pattern brands grade their patterns by difficulty level, and of those, which ones I have one of each of those levels of. Does that make sense? I think it does. I ended up on Vogue Patterns, who actually have 4 levels of difficulty, so I guess it should technically be easy, medium, hard, and harder? I don't know. But I did see that Butterick and McCall also give their patterns a difficulty rating. So if you enjoy this, let me know and I could do them also. These are the patterns that I have found in my stash. In Vogue terminology, we have very easy, easy, average and advanced. But today we are going to start over here with very easy. But I am going to do all of these, so stick around and subscribe if you are interested in seeing the rest of them made. I'm going to use this fabric. I have a big old roll of it that I got at a charity shop, and I think it's technically the sort that you would use for men's business shirts, but strangely enough, I don't make a lot of those. But there is plenty here to make a really nice swooshy dress. First things first though, I need to cut out the paper pattern. I've got all my pieces cut out now, so it is time to start assembling this. Now for the purpose of this experiment, I am going to follow the pattern instructions. Normally I just wing it. I use the pattern to cut out the garment, but then I put it together however I feel. It's not always the best way, but it does get put together. But for this, I am going to follow the instructions, except most commercial patterns won't tell you to finish seams. So I am going to overlock some of these pieces before I start sewing. The bodice is lined, so it doesn't need any seam finishing, but the skirt seams will need finishing. So let's go to the overlocker. I've overlocked my pockets and skirt edges, so they are ready to go. I can now start working through the actual pattern instructions. And the first thing it's telling me to do is fuse some interfacing. Once I've got that done, I can put the bodice and bodice lining together. So let's go do that. I've got my two bodices sewn together, so my outer and my lining. I was absolutely sure that I was going to sew one of these pieces the wrong way on because the right side and wrong side of this fabric is very similar. I don't even know which side is the right side. But I got all the seams on the same side, so winning. Now I've just got to turn them into one. Lining is now attached to my outer and it's looking like a finished bodice. Last thing I've got to do is finish the straps off. Alright, that's my bodice completed. Well, I obviously still need to attach it to a skirt and put buttons and buttonholes in the front, but that happens at the end. For now, it is completed and I need to move on to the skirt. First things with the skirt is the center back seam, and then we do the side seams, making sure I remember to put the pockets in as well. So my skirt is nearly there, side and back seams are together, it has pockets, which is obviously the most important part of any skirt. But now I'm going to work on finishing this center front edge, which has its own facing. Because this is a button design, it has a bit more structure in this center front, where I am going to put buttons and buttonholes last. And the instructions do tell you to finish the unnotched edge of your skirt facing. It doesn't tell you how to finish it, so I'm going to overlock it. My skirt is now completely assembled. I love how much volume there is in this. It's gonna be really fun to twirl in. I'm excited. Now I'm ready to attach the skirt to the bodice by first machine stitching the outer bodice layer to the skirt and then slip stitching by hand the lining layer over that seam. bodice is now attached to the skirt, so all that's left to do to finish this off is put 10 buttons and buttonholes in the front and do a hem. Everything is now done on this dress, so let's try her on and give her a twirl. So there we go, the very easy pattern complete. What do you think? Would you consider this a very easy pattern? I'm actually not sure if I would. I had no issues making this, it wasn't complicated, so I think I can call my skills higher than very easy Vogue level. But it did have a few like hand finishing things like slip stitching the shoulders and the bodice lining, and there was understitching, which are not in of themselves hard skills, but would a beginner know what they are and how to do them? I don't know. The pattern itself isn't too hard and there's not too many pieces. There's no really oddly shaped fiddly to sew pieces. So from that point of view, it is an easy pattern. But if you have sewn this pattern before, let me know what you think it should be rated as. Oh, and I also kept track of how long it took to make this. From cutting out the paper pattern to the final press took me roughly 10 hours. Some things that I would do differently if I wasn't following the pattern instructions exactly, I would sew the skirt first so that I could then hang it up while I continued on with the bodice, and that way the skirt panels could drop if they wanted. It is a circular cut skirt. This fabric, I don't think that there's going to be any issues, but some fabrics really drop. I think I would sew the buttonholes a little closer to the edge. I have sewn them exactly where marked on the pattern, but I feel like they're just that little bit far back from the edge so that this flops around a little bit and doesn't sit exactly flush. And I wouldn't do that first line of stitching on the hem. It was really helpful in pulling in the excess fabric of the circle skirt and made it a little easier to sew. But I am pretty confident in sewing my normal narrow double rolled hem, which is basically what this ended up being. So I would just do that and not that first line of stitching, which means I use less thread, which means there's more thread for the next project. And finally, this is entirely a me problem. I would cut maybe a size smaller, or I'd take the time now to unpick the lining and pull in the waist a little bit. It's fine as is and it's really comfy, but I do just think that it would look a little bit better if the waist was ever so slightly more snatched. But overall, the directions were good, they were really clear, I had no issues following them, and I am really happy with the final result. The bodice has a nice shape, the skirt is lovely and twirlable, and it has pockets. What more can a girl ask for? I think it's going to be the perfect summery dress as we are heading into warmer weather here in the Southern Hemisphere. So that is the Vogue Patterns Very Easy level complete. I hope you've enjoyed it and come back next week for the easy level. See you then.